Hello, everybody. Welcome to Untether.tv. I'm your host, the founder, Rob Woodbridge. This is the place you come to understand what is going on in the mobile industry, to hear conversations with the folks that are changing this industry, changing the world, I believe, through this great thing that we call mobile, getting the insight that you need in order to bring this stuff into your business or launch new businesses. And of course, that's what we're doing here today. This whole HTML5 thing has gone off the rails. Financial Times has abandoned the iOS version. They abandoned all apps in favor of HTML5 as of May 1st. It's now all HTML5. We've got NSFW, which is a new magazine that's launched, a for-pay magazine that is launched in HTML5 only. You got the Toronto Star up here in Canada, Torstar. That is an HTML5 only application, no iOS, no apps. And then we've also got the Technology Review, which has abandoned applications. So what is going on in this industry? What is happening in publishers? And where does HTML5 fit into this whole ecosystem we call mobile? There's nobody better to talk about this than my guest. Well, he laughs, but it's true. It's Carnet Williams. You've seen him before here. We spoke last September of 2011 when right about a month after his company was acquired by InMobi. He's the VP of InMobi's Sprout, Carnet, and he's actually live from Bangalore, India, with about 44 minutes of sleep in the last, 4 weeks? That's what it's been about right for you?
About.
Welcome, Carnet. Thank you so much for taking some time late at night in Bangalore to come up and kind of enlighten us. Talk to us about what's going on in mobile around this HTML5 stuff. Welcome, man.
Thank you so much, Rob. It's good to be back, and looking forward to chatting.
Well, there's lots to talk about. We talked, as I said, in September, about a month, last September 2011, about a month after your company had been announced that your company was acquired by InMobi. And we really focused on HTML5 as an ad display, as an ad mechanism, as an ad network. But obviously, 9 months have gone by, or roughly, since then. So much has changed. InMobi, raised a lot of money and has been forefront of some of the most amazing technologies and great customers, great clients. But what's gone on? Tell me what has happened at Sprout and InMobi since we last sat down. Actually, before you say that, what is Sprout? What is InMobi? Let's start there.
Well, thanks. Well, first of all, InMobi is the largest independent mobile ad network in the world. Started out of Bangalore, India, and has offices in basically most every country around the world. Has been responsible for everything from performance mobile ads to rich media ads. And really, when you look at the mobile space, InMobi is expanding. And we are really looking at how do we become a player in the entire ecosystem. And as we talked back in September, Sprout was their first acquisition. And really, it was a big play in bringing in HTML5 technologies, not only into the network, but to augment and enhance most everything that they're working on. And so we've been really busy. As you can imagine, getting integrated. I've got a couple gray hairs since you last saw me, and I've been traveling around the world. I think I've done about 500,000 miles, in the last 8 months. But it's been great. This is a fantastic field, as you and obviously your audience knows, and it's going faster than I ever imagined. I don't think anyone has ever predicted how fast this field was going to grow. So it's been quite a ride.
Well, we were talking right before we started filming, the missive that this industry changes. There isn't a year in this industry that everything remains the same, and I think that it's kind of we're in quarterly or 6 month cycles of massive redo. Right, the things that we thought were amazing 6 months ago are completely alien to us now because we've moved so quickly beyond. So, from that time when we connected. What do you think has been the biggest? We didn't even talk about this. What do you think has been the biggest change that you've seen in this industry from the time that you last fall till now? Aside from crazy valuations and Instagram closing for $1 billion.
Oh, come on, $1 billion here and $1 billion there. What's $1 billion to friends, right? I mean, I just had my hoodie on. I'm sorry, it's getting a little warm. I had to take it off. No, I think what it really is, and I think for a lot of what I would say us old farts, right, that have seen what happened on the desktop world, is we're just seeing a acceleration and a real, compact time frame as to everything we saw in the desktop world. I think in mobile, one of the things that I always say is, back in the days, and don't want to date myself too badly here, but I remember when all the publishers and corporations were like .com. Don't know what it is, but I got to have one. Hey guys, can you go make sure we get a .com and make sure we have a website up and running as soon as you can? And I think that the first pass, a lot of these publishers, particularly a lot of these newspapers, content providers, really just sat back on their heels and said, remember the old saying, "Oh, this internet, it's a fad. It's gonna pass, and we'll go back to print and paper, and don't worry about it." I think mobile has given everyone a second chance. They're saying, "Wow, okay, we get a second try at this." And as mobile came about, I think everyone now is being aggressive. They're being as proactive as they can. And things like Financial Times, who would have thought? Hearst Publishing with Mary Claire, who would have thought? Saying, "Hey guys, we're not going to be last. We're going to be first." And we're seeing a lot of people say, "Man, we've learned from our mistakes. Let's not just follow and do what everyone else is doing. Let's really look at what we need and how we're going to keep our businesses afloat." So it's survival. I think back in the days, these publishers, they were fat cats. Hey, we got circulation. We've got tons of people reading our magazines and newspapers. We're just fine. Now it's like we've got to fight for our survival. In a sense, they're becoming startups all over again, right? They're the underdogs. They're the ones that have to crawl out of the hole. They've got to go find a way to keep their businesses running. And I think we're going to see a lot of innovation, a lot of risk taking from what you sort of consider the most traditional of businesses in the digital world.
Well, they certainly have a lot to lose, and I would say that I do some work with Canada's largest publisher media company here in Canada. It's a cross country. It has 13 dailies. It's a pretty big company, $1 billion plus in revenue, and when I go and visit them in any of their locations, I see the whites of their eyes. Like this is a time of absolute, from an outsider who's not in the business, I look at this and think, "Oh my God, you guys are so lucky. This is a great opportunity to reinvent your business with an established audience. Millions of people consume your content across a country and around the world." And they don't look at it quite that way, right? They're looking at it with the whites of their eyes, big eyes, thinking, "I am scared because we're getting attacked on all angles. Revenue is declining in print. And what, we're supposed to give it away? No, we spend, what this company maybe spends $300 million or $400 million a year in salaries to write the content and get it out there." So this is a confusing time for those guys. But, I don't know any other industry that is being disrupted like this in real time as we're watching it. Do you?
No, absolutely not. But, with fear, I think, comes a lot of innovation, and with risk comes those that are going to win. And I think those that are willing to, as they say, roll the dice and go for it, may be the ones that end up surviving.
So what about what's going on now with the HTML5 world? Because there's still this ridiculous debate that is going on, HTML5 versus native apps, and I think that this will never go away until everybody's on HTML5. Apps are a distant memory for the most part, and then it's like, oh, is it HTML5 or XX technology, right? I think that's going to this is how we evolve. But what about what has happened in the last bunch of months that has brought HTML out to prominence? I mean, Sprout and you have been involved in this for so long. Did something happen? Did an accelerator happen in the last number of months?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of things, and I it's hard to say that I'm a historian because it's only been about 10 years.
That is history, man.
It is history, but I go back to, if you think about what the promise of the web was, right? When the guys first started connecting PPP, if you remember that, point-to-point protocol, it was about sort of giving everyone access to the same information. And it's funny how things happen circular, right? When you had the very first browser, it worked for everybody because there was only one browser. And then you had the browser wars. So you got this fragmentation, and you had IE versus Netscape. And we got this real fragmentation where not every website looked the same to everybody. What's really changed, I think, since the last time we talked is, I'll say it, it's Android. If the world was all iOS, it'd be simple. It probably would be all native apps because as a publisher, I'd just build an iOS native app and I'm good to go. But we're seeing Android make a huge push in the marketplace, not only on smartphones, but tablets. We're seeing Microsoft make a big push with Windows Phone 7 and Windows 8 coming out, which, by the way, is a beautiful operating
Yes, it
system.
is.
We haven't seen the last of Palm OS, I don't believe. I think there's something to be said there. I think RIM, with whatever they have left in their tank, is going to make a big push. And so we're really seeing a truly fragmented mobile space where if you're a publisher, and I say this specific for publishers, is you need to reach the widest audience. As you said, you've got this great content, but you need the audience. You need people to actually access that, either to make money from subscription or from advertising. And what's changed is that it's no longer iOS world. And that has really, really created this unbelievable fragmentation where, as a publisher, I'd have to have a whole software development team building an iOS version, an Android version. Oh, wait, there's 3 flavors of Android. You've got ice cream, you've got, all the different versions. And then all of a sudden, well, what about Windows? Maybe we should support them. And so I think that's really what's happened since the last 2 quarters. And it's brought us to where we are now, which is really a decision. Do I native app or do I HTML5?
Well, and a lot of people who tested. Well, I think that the Financial Times really was one of the first companies, in my knowledge, that very quickly built an app and then very quickly started directing people to their HTML5 version of the website, and then very quickly made that their key focus. And even the company I was talking about, this national media company, publishing company, built native apps for all platforms, right? And so iPad, iPhone, Android, BlackBerry, and then obviously the derivatives, their HD version for the latest iPad, and then the maintenance of this required a staff. And is it just about complexity? I mean, when should people be using HTML5 versus native applications? Are we starting to see that line now where it makes sense? Apps over here, HTML5 over here.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think that for certain applications, if you look at something like an Instagram, right? It's a native app. It works great as a native app. The user interface, the way you interact with it, it's got to be built as a native application. But for content providers, they've got a couple things going against them. They've got a lot of content. Content is very heavy, right? If you look at something like a Wired magazine, those are 400, 500 meg magazines. They're being pushed as a native app. That's a lot of content to be pushing to a native app. And so I think HTML5 allows you to display and distribute much heavier, more sort of intensive content across a very broad range of users. So with HTML5, you're able to quickly send that information across most anyone that's accessing it. I mean, even desktops, if you think about it, there's going to be a time when all browsers support HTML5 on the desktop where you don't really even need a Flash version of your site anymore. And so I think for content providers and particularly publishers, it makes a lot of sense when they're renewing their content on a weekly, daily basis, and they need to be able to reach the broadest and widest audience. And they don't particularly need all the bells and whistles that a native application gives you. And then there are those native applications, games, social applications and such, that it makes sense to have a native app. It's something that sits within its own sort of container as a native app, and people are expecting the sort of highest of user interface capabilities.
Well, it absolutely makes sense. I was just, as you were talking there, I was flipping through the Wired app, which is a very rich application, and you're right. They were talking about a tremendous cost to develop this, as you said, tremendous cost to push this down to the device, and I subscribe to that for some reason. I think it came down to a $9 price tag, but I think that is obviously has a lot to do with it. The cost of this content, is you alluded to it before, that they've had many years where they've had great years and they've made a lot of money in the publishing space, and now their margins are shrinking quite a bit. So, I mean, I come back to this all the time around this, is that, what was the strategy and thinking for something like the Financial Times to decide, listen, we are going to go native HTML5, and do you think that this is just the beginning for this industry to move into that direction?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for Financial Times particularly, but I would say that for publishers, right, what you just said right there is, let's take Wired Magazine, that $9, but they don't really get $9, right? Because
Right,
Apple takes
right.
30% off the top, so they're getting, $6. And so, with margins being increasingly pressed down on these publishers, that's basically their profit margins. And so, another way of looking at HTML5 is that it's a way to circumvent this sort of stranglehold that Apple has on iOS applications and the toll that they're charging for subscription-based revenue models. And so, HTML5 gives you a way where you can now not only distribute to the broadest range. So, Wide Magazine right now, I can't view on my Android app, right? They put all this money into the iOS version, but hey, what about the Android folks? And then I think there's also the ability where it's survival mode. These publishers have to squeeze literally every penny they can from every person that will pay. And so HTML5 gives them a way to get a much larger proportion of those dollars if they're going to charge a subscription. And it also allows them, going back to sort of my ad bias a little bit, it allows them to run really rich media ad units on those HTML pages that they control inherently. And so I think it goes back, and I hate to say, it goes back to just basic economics. If you're a publisher and you're just barely making it, you're not going to give 30% away of your revenues and try to survive off what's left.
Well, I heard or I read in an article recently that most publishers' margins aren't even 30%, right?
Yeah.
So maybe they're 27 or 28%. So they're basically paying. They would be paying Apple to be a part of their as a distribution show, like 3%. In addition to what they're actually making. Yeah. So it costs them so much to be a part of this. So obviously that's a big thing. And a common question that comes up quite often is around revenue generating. So, a company like, is it Technology Review, and a company like NSFW or a magazine like NSFW is now talking about, listen, it's subscription only. And I'll talk about Variety Magazine in a second, but these guys are coming out and they're saying, it's a subscription only, and it's an HTML5 app, and there's no ads. But there are ways to turn these things into revenue. Obviously, that's where you've been for most of your life is in turning these things into revenue. There are opportunities there. I mean, aren't there for publishers to actually make money out of this? They're not just giving away their content, are they?
No. Obviously, they can't just give away their content, right? It's just basically two models. They either can charge for it in a subscription-based model, in which case people are like, well, I don't want to see any advertising, or they can put ads into it. And that's the two basic models that they have.
All right. So I'm just pulling up the, obviously, there's a great article that you were quoted in Mobile Marketing when it came to what the impact of this is going to be. What was the gist of this? Did they have any backlash when it came to the consumers who were Financial Times users when they got rid of the app, or did it seem like it mattered?
I think to a user, it doesn't matter, because when you're consuming content, you just want a nice, clean interface to consume the content you want to consume. You don't need these really fancy user interface controls. And so, to most users, I don't even think they know the difference.
It's true.
I think if we went out there and talked to most consumers, native apps versus HTML5 apps, they're like, look, I just want to view the content. I want it to view it easily, and I want it to work really well on my mobile device. So I think in the end, I've always been a big proponent of use the right tool for the right job. And so, yeah, absolutely. If HTML5 gets your content across and your customers, which in the end is who you need to please, are happy with how you're displaying the content, how they're interacting with it, then go for it. I think that's the best solution. And there's so many changes that have occurred in HTML5 to make it more, make it high performance. That even in the time since we talked in September, there's been tremendous advances, and those continue to be made all the time. Browsers are adopting and becoming more powerful when it comes to being able to render HTML5. There's more sort of server-side technology that's making the user interface seem more native application-like. I can't predict that HTML5 will absolutely mirror what you can in a native application, but then it does enough. It does enough for what a lot of people need. You don't need a Ferrari to drive down to your corner store to pick up some milk. You just need something that's going to get you there and get you back safely. And so, again, use the right tool for the right job. And I think what publishers are seeing is that, that mad rush to say, I need an app, I need an app. It's actually, we actually saw it with Facebook applications. Everyone said, I need a Facebook application, and because everyone else has one, and they realized, well, maybe I don't actually need a whole Facebook application. And so, we're just seeing a maturity of the marketplace where people are figuring it out, and I think HTML5 just came along at the right time to make that happen.
What about when we start to think about the promise of HTML was always that it was this ubiquitous cross-platform display language, which is it's not a programming language, it's a display language. But obviously with HTML5, those limitations we're hoping that there aren't these limitations that come through simply because a lot of companies are relying on this as that cross-platform piece, that ubiquitous display language. Because it is a challenge. I mean, you're building for multiple screen resolutions, now horizontal versus vertical resolutions. You're taking into consideration bandwidth constraints. Do you see, is HTML5 really that mature at this point, where you'd feel very comfortable with companies recommending to companies to say, listen, you know what? If you're ever debating between an app and HTML5, go with HTML5. Is that where your head is at now? Because of the advancements?
Yeah, and I think, again, it depends on what they're trying to achieve. But I think for publishers, the answer is yes. I mean, there's definitely been criticism in the marketplace saying that Apple and Google are restricting the advancements of HTML5 within their own browser because they don't want to make it so advanced that it really does circumvent the need for native applications. But, the market's going to dictate what the market dictates. And as more people move towards it, then demand's going to be there. And so I think it's plenty fine for most users right now. But there's going to be, the minority that says, hey, I want the fanciest, most sophisticated functionality. Well, you know what? For most people, they don't even know what they don't have.
It's so true. Well, but that's a really important thing here is that, I think that the behavior that we've seen for this first small phase in the mobile world has been early adopters and folks that really, I understand the difference between an app and a mobile website. And an HTML5 website. But the average consumer, it doesn't matter to them. What they want is what they want, when they want it, on the device that they're using in a format that they can consume, right? Isn't that ultimately what it comes down to?
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the thing to remember. If you're a publisher, right, you're dealing with smartphones and tablets today. In the very near future, you're dealing with IPTV. You're dealing with maybe a connected device on we use this analogy all the time, on your refrigerator. You may have something in your car. You don't know where this content's going to be published. And so, my advice always to people that I talk to is don't think about the device. Think about the screen size. Because in the end, it doesn't matter what the device is. If you're building something that will display on a particular screen size, it doesn't matter if it's on a TV, in a dashboard of a car, or on a tablet. It's going to display. And I think that that's the real premise and promise of HTML5 is that you can build it once and be pretty assured that it'll display wherever that person might access it. Native apps, not so much, right? You got to make sure it's the right operating system with the right, hardware acceleration, whatever it might be, to make your native app run.
So where does this go from here, Carnet? We've seen some serious advancements from a neat, some people taking advantage of HTML5, within the last year or two. Companies like the Financial Times saying, "Listen, we're committed to this." To really looking at publishers thinking, "Okay, maybe it is time to get completely out." Completely out. I'm just pulling up the Star, for example. Oh, it just went off. It's The Star is a Canadian newspaper that has gone completely HTML5. It's done with a company called Presley, and it's swipeable. It mimics that user experience, but in HTML5 that an app would do. So where does this go? Are we ready? Are we going to start to see this mainstream? And then what is the impact of non-device connectivity, like you talked about, like televisions, fridges I won't say, but cars, your personal dashboard. What is the impact of those vehicles for content display when it comes to how to make a decision on how to build, where to build?
Yeah, because you're taping me, I'm always afraid to make any predictions because I'm sure 6 months from now you'll call me back up and be like, hey, I thought you on tape saying this was going to happen. But no, I think that that's what's most exciting, and I think that that's what people have to embrace. I mean, business is always a little bit about risk, and so there's going to be those who are early adopters, those who are medium adopters, and then those who will sit back, wait, and see what happens. I think the key is to really change the paradigm. I think we've been so hardware agnostic, meaning we look at hardware, right? We've been so tied to our desktops, and then it was laptops, and then it was smartphones. I really think that we've got to get away from, again, as I said, the device itself to really what the screen is. It could be conceivable that in the near future, you don't even have a screen. Maybe this thing just pops up in the air like we've seen on Star Trek, and that's your content. And so you've always got to be thinking about what's your long-term strategy to make sure that that content can display anywhere that it might need to display. And taking a industry standard like HTML, I shouldn't even call it a standard. I caught myself there. It's not technically a standard yet, but it is something that the industry is working towards where it will be a standard in the next decade, shall we say. And I think that's the commitment you got to make. I don't even want to say it's long term because it's really very near term in terms of when it's going to be apparent. But I think that's the decision that needs to be made. And I think I'm seeing a lot of these publishers make the right decision and make it soon. And I think the key is you got to be decisive, right? If you really believe it's native apps, go native apps and go crazy and hog wild. If you think it's HTML5, go HTML5. Don't get stuck in the middle. Don't just hum and haw and maybe do both, right? I mean, every startup knows that to be successful, you've got to commit to one route and commit to it wholeheartedly. And if you need to change along the way, but don't put one toe in each sort of direction. And I said, back to what we talked about earlier, these publishers are fighting for their lives. They're startups. They're actually more startups, right? They've got everything to lose. At least a startup, people are like, it was a startup, it didn't work out. These guys have been around for hundreds of years. They've got a legacy. And so they've got to really make that choice. And I'm really glad to see folks like Financial Times and Hearst making that commitment. And I think we're starting to see that pay off. I've read some stats around Hearst with Mary Claire seeing like a 250% increase in impressions. And most data that I've seen out in the marketplace, these publishers saying, wow, we went to HTML5 and it really increased the number of impressions that we've had. I think that's a really good sign, and that should be getting other publishers to think about how they should jump on board and pick this direction.
Well, it's amazing because a company like, I just pulled it up, this was a Pando Daily article on NSFW Corp, how they dodged the newsstand bullet and lucked into HTML5 is what it's called. And you're right, this is a startup that didn't make a mistake. And in the article, they credit an article written by the publisher of Technology Review, Jason Ponton, sorry. My eyes are getting bad. I have to look close to the screen. But what he said was, we spent $124,000. We went down this path and we decided, look, at the end of it, we're going to go HTML5. We wasted all this money on it. So NSFW Corp said, listen, we're not going to make that mistake. We're just going to go HTML5. There are companies out there, I said Variety magazine, for example, that all they do is it's a subscription-based and they have a closed environment. They say you subscribe to the magazine, you get content across the feed, and they've gone this way as well. So we're starting to see this move. Big companies making decisions like this on non-standard technology, because HTML5 is not a standard yet. Should they be worried about this? A long time ago, Java, before, I knew lots of companies when Java was coming out, they created their own modules. They created their own versions of the language, and then they built their technology around it, only to have the actual Java come out with new code that broke everything that they did. Is there a worry around this at this point?
I don't think so. I mean, HTML5 is part of the WWC, so it is a standard-setting body. All the browsers are supporting the first version or the first iteration of the standard pretty much across the board. And really, there's not much customization in HTML5. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you can do on the server side, but you're still beholden to what the browser will do. So, it's not the magic bullet. There are still, vast differences between the browsers. But for the most part, if you're using the most common of functionality, the most common of animations and CSS, you're going to get a very good experience. It's when you start pushing the envelope a little bit is when you're going to start seeing some differences. But as I said, for publishers, for content, you can get away and use the basic functionality that's found in all browsers, I believe.
So this is, how do you feel now going into this? So you've been involved with Sprout. You have built, you were one of the first companies out there building ads in HTML5. You really embraced it. Like you said, you went all in HTML5. It paid off with the acquisition by InMobi. They took a risk maybe buying an HTML5 based ad company like Sprout. Now you're sitting 9 months later, you're starting to see this momentum. How does that make you feel about about the industry that you're in and the fact that you made these choices? Obviously pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to say that it was all based on our decision, but it's a lot of luck. I mean, if anyone who's ever been successful in a startup doesn't at least account some of it to luck and fortune, then I don't think they're telling you the truth. It feels good. We made a huge bet. We originally started in Flash, and about 2 years ago decided to go all into HTML5. And to be honest, it was a bit of a survival technique. We weren't as successful on the Flash side as we thought, and so as all startups, we made a key pivot. It was the right time to do it. And, I think the marketplace has just moved faster than we thought. If it had taken 2-3 more years, we might not be where we are. It just accelerated so quickly. And, we were fortunate enough to have an amazing team. I can't speak any higher of our engineers. They're just an amazing bunch of guys. They are, I will say right now, at the forefront of technology. They've written some of the most core mobile sort of framework for HTML5 that we use today. And I really hope someday we get a chance to contribute back to the community a lot of the technologies that we've built. Again, I think it's technology that should be given out to the whole community because it makes the whole industry that much better. And we're definitely committed to making sure that we contribute as much as we can back to making HTML5 perform on mobile as best as it can.
All right.
So it feels good.
Yeah, I think it would, and simply because we've talked about this before, but it takes that commitment and dedication to this platform, and you're going to see it until it continues rolling or it drives off a cliff, and you've got to kind of move over. I think nobody saw the I don't think it's Flash's demise, but the struggles that Flash has continued to have right now because of Apple. And then everybody waking up to the powers of HTML5. Nobody could have predicted that HTML5 would be the darling and Flash would be on the other side today. If you look back 2.5 years from now, before the iPad was launched, but that's what happened. Before I ask you my last question, I'm going to push people out. I'm going to pull up a screen here, which is our first interview. It's why HTML5 is the natural choice for in-app advertising. Now, what I would implore everybody to do is go and take a look at this. This was from September of 2011. Just do a search for Sprout on tether.tv, and you'll find a long interview that we did about why HTML5 is the optimum choice or a good choice for advertising. We get into a lot more detail around why, and it would be interesting to push, to put that conversation in context with this one, and you'll see the evolution of how HTML5 has come. My last question, though, here, Carnet, is really around some advice that you would dole out or dish out to clients or people out there listening who are struggling with this mightily. When it's coming time that they do have a mandate, they do have to create something. They're looking at these two technologies. How would you summarize a decision-making process that they can use and go out and apply that to making sure that they're making the right decision around HTML5, native apps, or a combination of the two?
Yeah, I think my biggest advice is decide on the technology last. I think what I see a lot of people do is they get really enamored with the technology and they decide, well, I'm going to use this technology and I'll make everything fit. I think, we've all been there, right? Especially with publishers. You start with an outline, a thesis. You decide what it is that you really want to achieve. You write it down, and then, go out and talk to people. Go out and talk to native application developers and see what they can deliver. Go out and talk to those who are developing in HTML5 and really look at, does the technology fit your need? And it will become very apparent in terms of what you need. And so my biggest advice, which I've been giving, for the last decade or two, is don't start with the technology first. It should be the very last part of your decision. Decide what it is that you want to achieve. Decide what it is that you want to deliver to your customers. Decide how you want to make money. Work up a revenue model. If losing 30% does not work, well, that's a pretty straightforward answer. Which direction you're going to go in. Development cost is a big one. Maintenance cost is a huge one with native apps. Looking at adoption curves, looking at data that's out there around sort of how people are accessing that. I would look at all that first, and to be honest, there is no decision to make on technology because it should become very obvious once you look at all those criteria. So I implore people, don't get enamored with a shiny new toy. Don't get enamored with what the technology or what it may be called, native app, Facebook apps, HTML5. Just look at what is it that you really need, want to achieve as a business, what's going to make you survive and be profitable as a business. And I tell you that the decision on the technology will be very easy to make.
That is stellar advice. Most people pick the technology first, like we said at the very beginning. We're in mobile, we need an app. You're in the web, I need a .com. What for? I don't care. They have it. We need it. Let's stop doing that. All right, Carnet, I'm going to let you get some rest. But before we do that, where should we direct people to go and find more information about you?
Well, definitely go to InMobi.com. We've got a great new website that we launched a couple months ago, and there'll be links to Sprout also at sproutinc.com. And definitely check out what we're doing. And definitely, if you have any questions, I'm sure I'm happy to give out my email address, or you can contact through Rob. Happy to dole out any advice I can to those who are trying to make decisions. And all I can say is good luck. It's a wonderful world out there that's mobile, and I couldn't be more excited. And if you're a publisher listening to this, if you're an advertiser, don't be afraid. Jump in wholeheartedly. The water's warm, and it's really fun.
That just made me think of one last question. It always happens this way, but do you a publisher is looking at this and they're playing with their website, they're playing with with mobile. I'm a mobile guy, so my belief is always, look, mobile is where you need to be. I mean, because that's ultimately consumption on mobile is now surpassed consumption on the traditional web, on the browser web. Do you look at that and say, for publishers, you just said, jump in, but they've got to jump into mobile wholeheartedly. They've got to commit with every fiber into mobile, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the beauty of HTML5 is that it allows you to commit to both desktop and mobile at the same time. And I think that's the real key. That's the real key. It's not, you're not committing to mobile. Again, you're committing to being untethered from the device, right? You want to just display your content on any screen. It could be the laptop that I'm using, the iPhone that I have charging here, or the TV that's in my room. Forget the device and go to the screen, and that will help make and drive your decision, because that's the future. It's all about the screen.
See, that's a better way to end it, right? It's all about the screen. We need these punchy lines like that. All right, go to InMobi.com. I pulled it up before. I'll pull it up the screen right now. InMobi.com. You can also head up sproutinc.com if you're interested in what Sprout does. You can also find, Carnet everywhere online. Just search his name. And if you have any questions about this, reach out or leave a comment here wherever you find this, and I will hunt down Carnet to answer those questions for you, or I'll do my best as well. Listen, and I really do appreciate this. A short notice and huge time zone. Make it a challenge, but I really do appreciate you logging in from Bangalore to do this. I really appreciate it, Carnet.
This has to possibly be a record, right? I mean, is this time zone possibly? You guys?
This is it. I think Bangalore is it. Yeah. Now,
I get on your wall of fame, the time zone wall.
Time Zone Wall of Fame, and you've got to keep going west. So we'll just follow you west. If you hit Japan, we will definitely do it from there, just so that we continue this tracking Carnet across the country.
I like it. We'll do a world tour interview sometime.
Nice. I'd like to come with you. I'll just follow you around with my camera.
Nothing wrong.
We've been speaking with Carnet Williams, who is the VP of InMobi's Sprout. Go to inmobi.com or sproutinc.com for more information. I really appreciate Carnet coming on and doing this. I really appreciate the fact that you guys are watching and listening wherever you are. I know you've found tremendous value. Show me some love. Leave some comments. If there's somebody out there in the world that you work with that you think should have a listen to this, maybe in the publishing space, forward this to them, please. Let them know that it exists. It's relevant to them. There's some great advice in here. Make sure that they know about it. Make sure that you come back next time on Tether.tv. Carnet, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Folks out there, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time on Untether.tv. Get some sleep, man.